Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. My name is Nadia. I'm a UK Global Talent Visa recipient and coach. Really happy to see you join live, or if you're watching this as a recording, thanks so much for watching this as well. So like I said, I'm a visa recipient. I got this visa myself in 2022 as a software engineer. And ever since, I've been helping people get endorsed for the visa as well. Over the time, I've helped over 400 people with consultations. Many of them became my coaching clients, and it's been an interesting journey, to say the least. So if you're curious about my services or you want to learn about how I can help you get endorsed, this is my website, vitalhelp.com, and you can learn more here. So with that out of the way, I'd like to invite my today's guest, one of my former clients. Jim, welcome. Yep.
Hey, thanks so much. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, welcome everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So Jim, as you guys can see from the title of this video, has quite an unusual job. So Jim is actually an enterprise agile delivery and transformation coach, which is an example of professions I don't think I've seen covered anywhere online when it comes to global talent visa. So I'm really happy we get to record this, because still people think that the global talent visa is just for coders or maybe designers, right? But there is a lot of other professions that can also get endorsed. So yeah, Jim, maybe we can start with an intro. You can tell us a little bit about yourself, what your career background looks like, and in general, how did you hear about the global talent visa and how did you get interested in it?
For sure. Yeah. My background, I started a bunch of years ago and I ended up working for the same company for just under 20 years. And during that time at that company, that's when I got into tech, became a developer myself, and then ended up becoming a development manager. And I did that for probably about 12 years or so. Along the way of doing that development management, I discovered Agile. And so we're here to talk about global talent, not Agile, but it is part of my story. And so when along that route, I got involved with a lot of local meetups and I got active in the community. And that's kind of how I grew and how I learned. And then just over time, developed my skills, started working for different companies. And the last company that I worked for was really one of the pivotal points for what sent me towards the direction that I am now, being here in England, just outside of London, as my own sole proprietor business. So, yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. So how did you learn about the global talent visa and how did you decide to apply for it?
So I knew, my wife and I knew that we wanted to move and live outside of the U.S. And so we were looking around. We did some experiments, and we did over the last 2 years or so. We've spent about 6 months here, just meeting people, getting to know communities and whatnot. And we found that England was where we wanted to be. The UK was where we wanted to be. And so then I started looking like, okay, well, how do I work here? And I started looking at some of the visas about the entrepreneurial visas, different things around that. And they just seemed very overwhelming. I'm not bringing a new, fresh idea to market, but there's still a lot of need for what I do. And so I happened across to just looking at what is every single visa type that I could do. And global talent was one of them. And the more I learned, the more I discovered, I'm like, oh, this actually lines up really well with not only my background, but also the methodology and the way that I think, right? It's like I want to help grow communities. And when I read through the information that Tech Nations put out for us, they're really looking for individuals that are helping to grow communities. And so it just seemed like an immediate and natural fit, for sure.
Yeah, and also you were likely attracted by the flexibility, right, that the visa offered you and just all the opportunities that would open up. So how did you approach actually applying for the visa? Obviously, we worked together in the end, but were you planning initially to apply on your own? How did you gather information? What was the process like?
For sure. Yeah, I'm smiling because part of the journey. I'm not sure how much you and I talked about it, when we first got together and you started coaching me, but, I'm like, oh, global talent visa, there's this really long document. Great. I'll just jump in and do this.
Yeah.
And I prepared all this documentation, and I spent over 20, maybe 40 hours of time just developing, like, okay, this is going to be my package. And I was away for a weekend, and one of my friends that had actually lived in the United Kingdom for quite a while, I'm like, hey, will you just kind of look over this and just see if it's got the right tone, right? I was a little bit concerned with like coming across too American, because I had been told that in some of my previous visits. So I'm like, just read the tone and see if the tone's right. And she told me, she's like, Jim, you can't submit this. This isn't going to work at all. And so like I had this moment of panic, like, okay, what am I going to do? And so then I immediately got online. I started looking for people, and I found your content, and I started watching. I think I watched like every single video you have on YouTube, and
Wow, that's a lot
yeah,
of features.
it's a lot, it's for sure. And again, just hours and hours. I'm like, this is the direction I want to be. And so I put together a brand new package, probably spent another 20 hours on it. And I'm like, here we go. And then I'm like, but I really don't want to waste this opportunity. And so that's when I reached out to you, and we got connected and started working together.
Yeah.
And you told me, you looked at my package and you're like, yeah, you can't submit this. It's not going to do it. And so here I am, like, I'm back at ground zero again. I'm like, what in the world am I going to do here? So yeah, that's kind of how I got there.
Okay, so yeah, obviously you decided to get the review package. What would you say were like your the biggest changes that you saw after the review, and in general how useful you found it? Because again, this is a common question that people ask me. There is other free information, there is free content, free YouTube videos, like all of this stuff. And given that you've watched my content, for instance, right? What was it that was so different about the review, and what made it worthwhile for you to get it in general, considering how much research you've already done? You weren't like coming into this fresh, you've already done a lot of research.
For sure. I think it's really just it's a journey of iteration, and it's a journey of like step by step. And after I got that review, and then I ended up going through your course, the online course that you have.
Yeah.
And just watching each of those videos, applying the content, and just, again, completely rewriting things. But here's where the shift happened in that, is through that information that I got from you, that I got through your course, is I really just started to understand what Technation was looking for, right? Like, obviously I got the visa, they gave it to me. That process went fairly smoothly when I was finally ready and submitted. So like, I am the candidate, one of the type of candidate they're looking for, but being able to frame it in such a way, I've joked with my friends, I'm like, hey, in order to get this visa, you basically have to walk on water. And
Yeah.
that's the way it felt, for sure. And I would just I would sit at my desk, and I would just put my head in my hands, and I was just like, how am I possibly going to qualify for this? And I think the thing that your content really helped with, and your coaching really helped with, is that it kind of stripped away the emotional aspect of it and really helped me focus on just look, I can be emotional about this, or I can just look at the facts. What do the facts say? How do I best present myself? I think in either it was a conversation, a chat, or one of your videos, it was just like, look, like, you have to present yourself. Like, I typically don't like to do that. I don't like to sell myself. But you have to present clearly and articulate. Don't make anything up. Be accurate. Be honest. And just, but actually, let's talk about some of the things that you've done. And that really helped a lot.
Yeah. I think it's really important to take out the emotion out of this, and then I do see a lot of people struggle with this because they already come into the process with their own ideas of how the document should look like, what they should highlight. And there is such a big gap, I think, nowadays between the Technation visa guide and like the reality of what is expected, that I often talk to people who just, it takes time for a client to absorb that this is how it should be presented. And it might not always make sense to the client or to me. But yeah, I think here following the guidance very precisely really helps. I shared the link to my course as well for people who want to take a look at it. I just released an update to it so that it's all fresh and relevant, although like all of the content there was relevant all this time. So yeah, let's get into the details of it, right? Because this is what people want to hear in this interview. So, the basic documents that we need to submit, the letters of recommendation, CV, personal statement, and then the evidence documents. Let's maybe start with like the first document the technician reads, the CV and the personal statement. Maybe you have some high-level tips for people who are preparing to write those documents. Anything that you still remember?
Yeah, I think, writing a CV for this, you're not applying for a job, right? It's a different type of CV, not one that I'm used to writing. I'm used to writing a resume that I submit, super proud that I got my resume down to a single page and I feel like it says who I am. But that's not the content that I need to highlight, right? And so really understanding what does technician need to see, what are the things that they need to highlight. And we may get into this later, but I think you say this so many times, and I'm probably not going to say it the way you say it, but like you are really trying to capture from the very beginning and tell a story, and you're trying to make sure that that story is consistent all the way through. And so making sure that the CV lines up with that and lines up with the story that I'm about to tell with the rest of my evidence, that really, I think, made a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is where a lot of people fail because they start to gather evidences kind of here and there and they try to present everything, but then the whole thing doesn't really make sense. So I think the whole application should read like a novel, right? So like a 45 page novel that starts with the personal statement and the CV, and then you kind of give more and more detail with every single document that you are showing. So you have to pick and choose what you present. But to your point, CV for sure. I think a shorter CV doesn't really work for the visa because you want to present also your public speaking, your publications, mentoring, other awards that you have. You want to have the links, the stats. So it's usually a longer CV, right? And then some things are not super relevant there, like maybe you don't need to list all of your skills because here at this stage, it's assumed that you are a professional and that you can, you can have a job. That's kind of the baseline, right? You want to show more things that you can do to also support the other criteria. And what about the personal statement? Anything that comes to mind from what you learned while writing it, or maybe some misconceptions that you had before you started?
So as an Agile coach, I really like to I like to paint a picture, and I like to tell a very flowery story, use, different mental models to describe. And that's not what's needed here. And the story and that type of drawing somebody, and I'm not writing a novel here. It's like a novel in the way that it reads and the way that it flows. But I really, when I went through my personal statement and refined it, I really got to a place where it still said what I wanted to say, and it still made it very clear what my purpose was. But I didn't need to use, like, I actually had an analogy for some articles that I wrote about climbing the sand dune in Colorado. I'm like, the technician reviewers don't care that I'm climbing a sand dune, and they don't need to see that, right? The epiphany that I had while doing that. So really kind of refining down those words and getting them tighter made a huge difference while still being able to communicate the intent that I was trying to communicate.
Yeah, I think very often I see people being confused by the word personal in the personal statement, right? And they kind of go into too many details that are too personal, maybe not very relevant to the point of the personal statement as an essay. So they share too much personal stuff, maybe too many personal reasons for why they want to get the visa. And I think it's really important to keep the personal statement just focused on what they want to hear and what they want to see. So they just want to see basically two things, like why you are a global talent already, very, very briefly. And then what will you do once you get the visa, hopefully, right? Like what is your plan for how you're going to help the UK economy? And that's it. So it's not an easy document to write, I think, but it really helps, like if you write it at the end, once you already have the evidences, once you understand what is your story, what is the point of your whole application. And I think it really puts it together. And I really love helping people with personal statements as well, because this is, I think, where the application really shines. Here, I think important to remember that you've got to keep things very simple there, because it's not uploaded as a separate PDF, right? So it used to be, when you applied, it used to be copy pasted into TechNation's form on their website. Now there is a new process, so but it's still copy pasted into a text box, but now on home office website. But it's still the same thing. Basically, there is no formatting. So as you can imagine, you cannot really add URLs or any formatting or fonts or anything like that. So your story has to sell itself. And I think it's really important to think about it, because very often people start to use, bullet points, URLs, or some fancy formatting. So just keep it super simple. That would be my main advice. Okay, so if people are watching this live, feel free to ask questions, or if you're watching this as a recording, also ask questions. I'll answer them in comments. Okay, so imagine we're done with the CV and personal statement. So next up are the letters of recommendation. So I know people are also usually freaking out about them. So biggest question is who is the person to write the letter of recommendation, and then what should it be about? So maybe you can share some of your thoughts on how you approached choosing the experts, and then in general, what are your thoughts on what should be in those letters? How would you think about it?
Yeah, well, one of the things that really helped me was the person that is an expert should be somebody who would also be qualified to receive this, right? Like they are expert level in their field, and that gives their words weight. And so I think figuring out, really just kind of shooting for the stars, saying, okay, who are the people that know who I am? They know me. It would be a valid and real recommendation. But for example, one of those that I reached out to was the CEO of my company. And it's as I really got through the process and started working with him, what we got to is the reason that he brought me into the company. And he helped to describe that in his letter about me, and about why, the impact that I had on his company. And that, I think, really tells that story of how am I going to impact the UK economy, right? How am I showing that I'm an expert in my field? So if I had two tips to give, one would be, go ahead and reach for the stars and ask. They have to be somebody who knows you. They have to be somebody who can accurately speak to what you've done. But if it seems like it might be higher than you would ask, I think you should still do it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the worst that can happen, they will say no, right? So you are then in the same position. But honestly, usually people say yes. As long as they're not too busy to deal with this, I think it's always a good option. Really good points about, this person should be an expert, so they should be theoretically eligible for the visa itself. So, if somebody is not really at the seniority level or the recognition level of the visa, maybe look for somebody else. And also, you're absolutely right. The person has to know your work. So the rule in the guide is they have to know your work in detail for at least a year. It doesn't always mean that they have to be working in the same company as you, but for most people, it is the case. But also, I think it's really good to have somebody from the industry, somebody maybe that contributed to some open source project, or maybe some conference that you organized together. Basically, somebody who knows you from some other projects in the field. I think that makes a really good case as well. But also, it's not always a must. So I've had so many clients who only had letters from their, let's say, people who work at the same company as they did, and that also worked out. But it's good to have some diversity in terms of experts, right? So you want to have somebody maybe who's at one company, another person at another company, maybe different roles, right? So that can also really help make things interesting. Because also my one tip that I always give people is try to make your application interesting to read, so the assessor can actually learn something and have a good time reading it. Because so much stuff nowadays is generated by AI, and it's just the applications are becoming so similar and so boring that they are, I think, at this point, kind of unreadable. So focus on making sure that the whole application is an interesting experience, let's say, for the assessor. Okay, so the letters. In terms of, let's imagine that you're done with the letters, you have your big letters of recommendation. Again, a reminder, they have to be long, 3 pages long. They need to have the CV of the expert, right? Or their LinkedIn link, all the necessary data as well, which is in the guide. Make sure that you have it. The criteria, right? Like big mystery of the criteria. What are criteria? Which ones did you choose in terms of the optional? And yeah, let's start with the discussion of the criteria and the documents that you used.
Yeah, it's one of the things that as I went through and learned more about what I needed to submit for the Global Talent Visa, I focused a lot on my volunteering and what I've done for the community, right? So the outside of work impact that I've had in the community, that's really kind of, again, it helps tell us part of my passion, part of what I'm passionate about. And so fortunately, as I looked back over the different things that I would need, I've spoken at lots of different conferences. I was able to speak at one of the premier Agile conferences well before I even was thinking about global talent, right? And it's kind of funny because I was speaking at this conference. I was in this really large room, and I'm like, "There's no way I'm going to fill this room." When it came time for my talk, I filled the room. And so like I told my wife, I'm like, "Hey, go grab a picture of this because this is just kind of fun," right? And that actually ended up becoming part of my evidence, right? To show me on stage speaking at a major conference, Yeah.
Yeah. This is really brilliant because very often people don't have the evidence, right? They do stuff, they never keep track of it. They don't have pictures or screenshots. So it's really good that you had that. And also it's really good that you had evidence that was older, right? That it was from some time ago. Because one thing that nowadays causes a lot of rejections is actually having really fresh evidence documents. So this is one of the major reasons for rejections, because people are trying to boost their profiles very quickly, which maybe worked at some point in the past, but it really doesn't work anymore. So hopefully people watch this video and they understand that it doesn't work. And they don't believe people who tell them that it does work, because there are also people selling services like that. And I mean, sometimes, yes, maybe people need help with like their PR, right? Or whatever, getting like better public profile or personal brand. But technician is very specific, that they want to see a track record of doing stuff for the community, for instance, which you have, Jim. And we were able to highlight it in the application really nicely. The conference is always such a great evidence for everybody, for tech specialists, for business candidates as well. It's like the holy grail of evidence. So if I'm seeing a candidate who has conferences, I think it's always a big plus in my evaluation process. So as far as I remember, we chose the second criteria, so the contributions to the community outside of work, and then the third, contribution to the growth of the business, correct?
That's correct. Yep. Yeah.
Did you consider like other criteria when you were thinking about it yourself?
I mean, I think OC4, like, it didn't apply for what I do, right? And then I did take a look at OC1, and it felt like, because, and we talked about this too, being an Agile coach, where am I going to be strongest at? How can I show a track record of, being an expert in my area? And so the community and then impact on businesses that I've worked for, that just seemed like the natural fit for what I do. So.
Yeah, I think it's true. And again, hopefully this reaches the right audience, because I do discovery calls very often where people want to go for the innovation criteria, because the guide with the innovation criteria is so vague. You would agree, probably, right? It's like, what is it? Like, everything is innovative, right? If you present it right. But in reality, in technicians' eyes, very, very few things are innovative, and you have to prove them very specifically. So I would say for most people, actually, in business roles, for many people in business roles, it's really hard to prove innovation, because people who work in marketing, for instance, or sales, business development, or support role, for instance, it's just, you have to be like essential to the product innovation or technical innovation. So it works for product managers, for engineers, for designers, sometimes for founders. So I think in your case, it was fairly obvious which criteria you had to choose. Apart from the conference that you mentioned, what other kind of evidence did you use for the optional criteria number 2 for the community work, if you still remember?
Yeah. So a couple of different things. I've been a co-lead of a meetup in my area for many years now, and so I highlighted my volunteer work that way in helping the community, helping grow the Agile community and educate the Agile community. So that was definitely one of the areas that I was able to highlight. And then because I didn't necessarily have, like, I've not published a lot on a viable, like a valid place, right? I've written articles on LinkedIn that doesn't meet the criteria, right? So I've not been published in a place that meets the criteria. But yeah, so I leaned in pretty heavily to the volunteer work in the community that I've been doing.
Yeah. Okay. So again, for people watching, the second criteria is stuff that you do outside of work, but very important, it has to be done for free, right? So it has to be volunteering. It has to be, it has to be like unrelated to your job. If you mentor people at work, it doesn't count. Or like if somebody pays you to have a workshop, again, it's not what they're looking for. So this has to be like authentic volunteering work that you do. Also, like, to clarify, in the digital technology community, not just any volunteering that happens, right? So, okay, so then the mandatory criteria. So one of the evidences, as far as I remember, was related to your public speaking. What else did we submit? Maybe you have some other example that you remember.
I should have gone back and looked a little bit more deeply at my application.
No worries.
The relief of being done. I think one of the other areas that I focused on was some of the innovation. It's not innovation work, but some of the impact to the business that I had. There was a particular project that was a major transformation project at a company. The CEO had actually talked about it in his in his letter about me, and kind of the reason that they had brought me on to work there. So I think that was one of the other mandatories that I selected.
Yeah, so popular approach is to use some of the work projects in mandatory. Just very important that there is something else that you use, right? It can't be just work for most people, right? So here and there, I would see I would hear of a case like this where a person had no public profile, no conferences, no publications, nothing, just their work, and they got endorsed. We hear about those things, but to me, it's like a unicorn at this point. But better strategy is to have public stuff for the mandatory criteria. I think it works much better. So yeah, again, like if people have questions or they want to have their eligibility assessed, you can reach out to me. I shared my email in the comments, so email me and we can chat. Okay, so the questions I will ask about the documents, we got through them. In your experience, so obviously you had a couple of attempts, right? So you first prepared your documents and then your friend said that you can't submit them. Then I said the same thing. What was the hardest thing about this process? Did you feel discouraged while you had to rewrite the documents several times? Was there something in particular that you found difficult?
I think the hardest part really for me was figuring out how to articulate and frame the work that I've been doing. I really resonated with the fact that it's everything that I've put in my application wasn't just like the last 3 months. I really resonated and saw that it was a journey of my career, right? I think the hardest part for me was talking about some of those accomplishments and highlighting those accomplishments. And then the second part of that really was the just needing encouragement, just because it felt so overwhelming at times, especially after having rewritten it 2 or 3 times and then like, okay, I'm ready. So the emotional roller coaster of I'm ready, somebody looks at it, oh my gosh, I'm not ready. Those highs and lows got less and less as I got closer, So being able to look back on the progress that I made throughout the journey as well was a key point. But yeah, having a support community, people around, getting to get some messages with you that really helped, helped me narrow where I wanted
Yeah.
to be and where I needed to be was really great.
Yeah, yeah. I think support is important. I think when I think back to my experience applying for the visa, my biggest, I think, like my main emotion was just feeling quite lost when I was doing it for myself for the first time, because at this stage there was so little information. And there were immigration firms and there were some visa coaches, but I didn't reach out to them. So I was like, I'm going to do it on my own. And I think back then it was still unclear, really, like what the evidences should even be. You still had to collect the information based, from very many different sources. So I think nowadays, at least, you can find information, right? So you would agree that you can get a lot. I think you can get a lot done by just following free information and following the advice. Did you find the free information like that was online? Did you find it confusing, or did you feel like supported well by the free information that is out there? Just curious, what was the experience since you applied 3 years later than me?
Yeah. I mean, I think I found the forum extremely confusing. It just,
Technician
all
visa
across the
firm,
board.
right?
Yeah. So that was extremely confusing because it just seemed like there was a lot of contradictory information out there, or some of the, maybe not there, but some of the other places that I found, it was almost like, here's a hack, right? Here's a shortcut. Here's a way to get it done. And
Yeah,
integrity is in one of my core values, right? And I
yeah,
wanted to make sure that everything that I did was highly integrous.
yeah,
And was one of the things that drew me to you is everything that
yeah.
I saw from your content was just like, it was, don't look for the shortcut, don't look for the hack, put the work in. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to get this visa in the future, start now, right? There's things that people can do right now that they might be looking to a year from now that they want to apply for this, but they can have a huge impact on that application if they start today. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that, because I feel like so many people in this space, they completely lost sight of the integrity part of it, and they're looking for so many quick fixes, and they're like, if I write 3 articles, will I get endorsed? And it's just like, no, it's not about how many articles you have. It's more about the whole application holistically. Like, do you even have a good, consistent narrative and evidences that are spread out in time? And also, I think really good point that you mentioned about the technician visa forum. I tell about it. I tell my clients about it all the time, because I think it's still useful for research, right? If you wanna look for rejection reasons, this is what I use it for myself and then for my clients. Because sometimes I feel like when I tell a client that they're not eligible, they maybe don't really want to believe it. So I always send them to the forum to say, look for the rejection reasons, and you will see that there are trends, right? So I do recommend doing that on the forum. But a lot of information there is, I would agree, very confusing. And then there are nowadays, I think there are more people there who are giving advice, who are actually coaching people. So they have experience of looking at many different applications. Back in the day, it was just some volunteers doing that, and then they were given really, really strong opinions about stuff without much nuance, which I think can be dangerous. So yeah, I think overall my tip would be, um, I think the quickest thing is just to get a discovery call and get it done and understand your chances. I don't think it's worth it, like, to spend years on forums just trying to guess if it's for you or not. But yeah, I don't know, maybe you'll probably agree to that, but people do that,
yeah.
years
So
on forums.
I can tag into that too. So if you look at like every painter, every house painter, their house needs painting, right? Every
Yeah.
landscaper, their house needs landscaping. As a coach, I am always very reluctant to get a coach, but you need it. Like it's,
Yeah.
it's something that is worth the investment to grab somebody who has expertise and let them speak to your specific situation And the value in it is greater than the cost for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, me like I've while after being a coach for a while, I've become I've understood why you need a coach in many different spheres of life, right? When you need a fitness coach, why you need some other business coach or nutrition coach or anything like that. It just helps you do stuff so much quicker, and you in reality you save so much money if you actually find a good specialist for your specific goal, not to mention the time that you save, which is more valuable than money. But anyway, I think it was such an interesting process, and you got endorsed quite quickly, right? Or do I misremember?
Yeah, I was shocked. It was
What,
within 3 or 4 days, I think, actually.
3 or 4 days? Wow. Yeah. It was nowadays it takes longer. So the process changed. So I feel like there is more delays and just more chaos. So yeah, people, if you're applying, in like October 2025, things are slower now, but you can still hear back fairly quickly, I think. Okay, so to wrap up, usually I like to ask the guest if they have any tips they wanted to share with somebody who's just thinking of applying for the visa. Maybe somebody just, they go on YouTube, they see this live stream, and they're like, "Oh, global talent visa. What is it? How can I start? What is it for me or not?" Any tips? Any thoughts that you wish somebody told you when you just started writing your first draft of documents?
Yeah, I think the probably my hot take for the day is start, right? It's get going, get on the process. And if looking at this visa is something that you're interested in doing, then look at what you're doing in your community. If you're an Agile coach like myself, or maybe you don't follow into some of the other boxes that seem to have a clearer path, look at the evidence, look at the things. You're not looking for the quick fix, but you're looking at what can I start doing to adjust towards this trajectory, right? You want to apply when you qualify for it or when you are the person that they're looking for. But if you are not quite there yet, or if maybe some of where you're at is a little light, start making changes, start doing stuff today. So you can do it, is what I want to say first, and you get the Apple emoji there. So you can
Yep.
do it, and start today would be my hot take.
Yeah, I love it. Very, very positive. I love it. Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Jim, for sharing your story. For anybody who has any questions or doubts, if they're more private, email me. If they are, somewhat like generic, and you think people will benefit from it, you can ask in the comments. I'll later respond to them. If anybody needs help, feel free to reach out. Also, check out the YouTube channel. There are so many live interviews with people of so many different professions. I'm really happy we recorded this as well, because Agile coach, very unique. But also, please don't think that if you don't find yourself, like your profession, among all the interviews or forums or anything like that, that it's not for you. I would say if you have experience working in digital technology companies, product companies. So if you have experience working in a product company, this visa might be for you actually, and your specific role can be very different. But if you can gather enough evidence, you can get endorsed. So it's all about having the right necessary documents, and the process is really quite straightforward, I would say. I mean, once you understand what they really want, which takes time, but I understand how to do it. So like once you get the structure, and you know that you will be endorsed if you have the necessary evidence, and if you don't, you won't. So I think that's the beauty of the process. I think it's fairly straightforward, and you can understand, whether it's for you or not within an hour of a discovery session with me, and then you know what to do and how to move forward. Thank you so much, Jim, for sharing your time and sharing your story with all of us. It was a pleasure coaching you and recording your story as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and see you in the next live stream. I'll have another live stream later in October with another one of my clients, who is actually a brand designer. So also quite an unusual profession and story. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.